Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jack and Joe Show. I'm delighted to be joined once again by Jack Kelly as we discuss our first win of the season. So to everyone that's listening on the podcast, watching on YouTube, welcome along. And we hope you're ready to have a bit of positivity because the last few times we've spoken, Jack, have been completely disrupted by transfer news, me in particular being very, very negative. We can forget about that for a little bit, I hope, and talk about just some positives.
Lots of positives, I think. Look, Fulham 1, Leeds 0 was not the best game I've ever seen in the whole world. In fact, it was probably one of the worst first halves of football I've ever seen. But 3 points is 3 points. And I know Marco Silva won't agree with what I said in terms of luck sort of finds its way and sort of, it's interesting what happens when you get a bit of bad luck in the Premier League and then a bit of fortune in the Premier League. Two separate issues, said Marco Silva. But in my eyes, I feel like it didn't make it up for what happened at the Bridge, but it certainly went a long way to help it because we got 3 points.
Well, look, it's very early on in the season, but when I was looking at the live table with a couple of minutes left of injury time, I was looking earlier in the game, but even at that point, it would have been, not a great story. And you're seeing us in the bottom three, and don't get me wrong, it's not time to be worrying about a relegation or anything like that. But with a derby coming up, which we're going to speak about against Brentford, with away games coming up against Bournemouth and Villa and Newcastle, a home game against Arsenal, you're thinking, we need to win this one. And we need to give ourselves a little bit of breathing room and make it a good start. Because until that Chelsea game, I think that we were all quite happy with going through those first two games, getting points on the board. This one, I didn't really care about the performance. And thank God I didn't care about the performance because the performance was absolutely honking for most of the game. But by the end of the game, I think we deserved to win it. I thought it was a really poor game. I thought it was a really poor first half. And Leeds came and set up what they wanted to do very well, which is get out of there with a point. I've watched them now in all of their games this season because the other three have been on Sky. I thought that they were the better team against Everton, but didn't create many clear-cut chances. I thought that they were very, very poor defensively against Arsenal, but I sort of also get it because Arsenal are a much superior team to them. Again, they didn't create any clear-cut chances. And then I watched them against Newcastle and reasonably solid again at home, but didn't create any clear-cut chances. It's a running theme. So I wasn't surprised with what I saw from them, and I was relieved that the sort of performance that we put in was against a team like Leeds that maybe doesn't have the star quality to punish us, or at least the new signings haven't gelled enough. I thought that Okafor was actually pretty promising and pretty bright and at least quite forward-thinking. But I was quite relieved when I saw their team sheet and I saw that Willie Gnotto and Dan James were on the bench, and Aronson, who's more of don't like the phrase, but a more defensive first winger. He's not someone that's going to pile in with loads of goals and assists, but he's someone that works very, very hard for the team. I think that basically set what they wanted to do, and that was hang on in there, play on the break, make it hard for us, and if there's a game there to be won, then go for it. And they did make changes that were bringing on attackers to try and change things up. But I think second half we showed that there is a gap between the teams, which was always going to be the case when you're playing a newly promoted team after we've been in the league for a few years. And we were able to bring on some star quality from our bench. And ultimately, I'm just sat here very relieved that we're speaking about getting the job done and that we're going into that Brentford game with slightly less pressure, Jack.
Definitely. I think there's definitely would have been an issue if we'd had 0 wins from 4. And actually, if you think about the 4 games we've played so far, I really don't think, and I don't think we put a foot wrong in any of the games, really. If you think about the penalty we conceded, that's Berger sort of bringing down his man. That's obviously a mistake, but it's a penalty that's fairly soft. The Man United game, we were open at times and they probably should have scored a couple. But in terms of performance level and the way we came back into the game, very, very solid and getting a point. The game a couple of weeks ago, we were by far the better team in the first half. We should have been leading at half time and it was just weird circumstances. And then you look at the game on Saturday where we didn't give up many gilt-edged opportunities. Calvert-Lewin's header, Aronson's shot, Bogle's shot. I can't remember who. I think it was Stash or something. He screamed it into the Putney end late on, and then of course we come out with a clean sheet and still no goals conceded from open play. And I think that's really, really encouraging. You ride your luck at times. Leno made some really good saves against Manchester United, but I think it's been a really, really solid start to the season. And this is probably us playing at about 6 out of 10. And I think there's going to be new levels we go to, especially with Kevin, who we need to talk about in this video, who was probably, for me, the best debut I've ever seen from a Fulham player. And it's alarming me now that I think everyone's aware of it now. Lots of compilations going round on X, lots of big numbers on those compilations. People saying, well, that's our signing for next summer. He played 22 minutes of football for Fulham. He was outstanding. And he was literally, I went to the pub after the game and everyone was talking about it. I've never experienced anything like that before, where you go into a pub post-match where you've won, but everyone's just talking about one player and one player only. It was honestly, he dominated all the chat. And I think that's obviously a good thing. The way he sort of jinked inside, linked up with play, put crosses into the box, had a go, shot from 25 yards and almost beat Darlow, led to the corner which we scored from. It was an outstanding debut, and he basically changed the game. Penny for Iwobi's faults right now, because Iwobi's doesn't bring that to Fulham's game. Kevin very much does, and we're still yet to see Chukwueze as well on the other side. I thought that the performance, it's concerning. It's concerning me that we're struggling to break down a low block. It's concerning that the way in which Leeds set up, we weren't able to create clear-cut chances, especially in the first half. It was concerning that Berger's performance for me was very much under par. Lukic was trying to get forward, and I was sort of thinking about this a lot over the weekend. Berger and Lukic, who are basically our mainstays in midfield, we don't really have now a replacement for them that's going to progress the game apart from Tom Cairney, in my opinion. And you can maybe put King in the number 8 and push Smith-Rowe higher up the pitch, but losing Pereira, not replacing him, or not getting in another 8 that can sort of battle with him. Harrison Reed's obviously another option as well, is a cause for concern for me. And if things get stale in the middle of the park, when we're trying to break down a team, I fear that things, obviously the forward line is very, very good, and I think that chances will be created. But it's when we're on the ball in midfield that I feel very unsteady about. And I think that was a demonstration against Leeds where they just genuinely did give us any space. And it was, Josh King was actually, trying to receive the ball. We tried to flick it around the corner and try and do clever things, but ultimately we couldn't make anything stick at all. And a lot of our play was going down the left-hand side with Iwobi, who wasn't really up to scratch. Harry Wilson had obviously a free kick effort in the second half. Look, I'm concerned for some level, but if you think about 5 points from 4 games, that's exactly the points tally we were on at this stage last season. And we were coming out of the game against West Ham absolutely gutted that we didn't get 3 points. And we've come out of this game against Leeds absolutely delighted that we've gained 2 points from a draw to a win. So it's a very contrast of feelings, and I think that we're in a good space. And I think that once Robinson comes back and starts linking up with Kevin, I genuinely think that's going to be the most dangerous left-hand side, one of the most dangerous left-hand sides in the Premier League.
Absolutely. And you factor Smith-Rowe into that as well, who came off the bench with a great cameo and actually seemed to link up with Kevin really well. Josh King just had one of those games where I just felt he couldn't quite get into it quite as much as in the others. And I felt that Leeds really physically targeted him, which was probably the right tactic. It was just a bit unfortunate from Josh King's part. Just couldn't quite get into the game as much as he could in all of the other 3, I would say. But I loved that the subs once again made us stronger. What I would like to see is a few changes ahead of this Brentford game to go with a more proactive team from the start. I think there are still good options we can have coming off the bench. But when we saw that lineup on the way to the ground, Jack, or you were probably already there actually, and you see Berger and Lukic in midfield, and I'm thinking, is that actually what we need in a home game that we should be winning? I was thinking, is it the sort of thing where we are being a little bit too reserved? And I understand that we're going to make changes that are going to make us better as we go on, and we're going to make attacking changes. Kevin's on the bench, he's going to come on. Rao was obviously going to come on at some stage for Muniz, probably regardless of scoreline. I would love to see that change versus Brentford, because I think that if we do want to push on to the next level, and Silva's very ambitious, we need to be prepared that these teams are going to sit back against us no matter how we set up. They would have set up that same way, Leeds, whether we played Berger and Lukic or whether we played Iwobi in a midfield role, whether we played Josh King and Smith-Rowe, for example, whether we started with Kevin and went a little bit more attacking on the left-hand side. So I would like to see us go for these teams from the off, because you saw that when and I understand that Leeds were sitting back a little bit more, but when Smith Rowe and Kevin came on, Leeds could not keep hold of the ball because we kept forcing them backwards. They had no out ball. It wasn't Calvert-Lewin at that stage. It was probably Nemecha that had to drop another 10 yards, retreating into the Leeds half. There were just so many factors that helped us keep that pressure. And ultimately, I'm not going to say that this led any pressure for that individual Leeds player, Goodmanson, to make that mistake that 99 times out of 100, obviously, the ball doesn't end up in the top corner for us. But ultimately, pressure makes players make silly decisions and make mistakes. And I do honestly feel that if they were cruising, that corner's probably dealt with easily, or in a normal situation. If that was like 10 minutes earlier, but, they're seeing the clock running down, they're seeing Kevin just turning them inside out every time he gets on the ball. There must be something inside their head, where they're thinking, okay, I'm no longer thinking we can nick this. I'm now thinking, let's get out of here with a point. And that mentality change can make players do interesting things. And I would love to see us dominate Brentford like we did last year. Scoreline hopefully will be forged in a different way that doesn't make me as stressed. I know the club account tweeted something like "never change Fulham," and there was a lot of fans saying, "No, please do." And I must admit, I would enjoy a more stress-free afternoon. But we got the job done, and I'm happy. But there's learnings that need to be taken on to the Brentford game.
I think this is now the conversation we need to be having, because the midfield situation is interesting, because I put to Marco Silva on Friday, I said, look, the fact you can play Iwobi in midfield, does that give you a crumb of comfort? You're talking about you're disappointed you didn't get another midfielder in, but surely that would give you a little bit of an extra body in midfield now that Iwobi can play in that position. And he just flat out said to me that it's not good enough, and that basically it doesn't make it better whatsoever because he wanted another midfielder. And I was like, listen, fair play. Will it be a case of Marco's stubborn, where he doesn't play Iwobi in midfield because he wants to sort of be like, well, this is what, this is the problem that we have. We don't have another body in this position. I think that ultimately he's going to have to play Iwobi in the middle at some point, because it will give more license for Kevin to play. And ultimately, I think Kevin might be our best player. And I think Kevin is going to be our best player this season. Obviously, sometimes, when you see things and you get excited about certain players, people come back to you and say, well, you don't need to overhype him. Like, you've only seen him 22 minutes. It felt as if, like, whilst that is also the case, nobody was like, you're getting carried away. I think everyone was on the same wavelength on Saturday night, where they were thinking, this guy is going to be incredible. And let's not beat around the bush. There's going to be games where Kevin doesn't make much of an impact or enough of an impact, because that's just what happens. That's part and parcel of football, right? But it does feel as though we've got a player who is a complete and utter game changer on the left-hand side. And I'm not talking game changer in terms of coming off the bench and making a difference. I'm talking, when he starts and if he starts and when he links up with Anthony Robinson and Smith Rowe or King, like you say, we're going to be dynamite. When Reece Nelson started playing, I think when he came on against Everton, and he was really, really impactful. And it felt like, oh, cool, we've got something different here. And with Nelson, it was almost like, yeah, well, he looks good, but he couldn't finish his chances against Crystal Palace. He then got injured. He didn't see him much this season. If Kevin stays injury-free, I think we've got one of the best wingers in the Premier League. And again, I don't want to exaggerate. That's genuinely how I feel. And it's made me think very differently about this Fulham team now. I would be amazed if we are sat here at 6:45 on Saturday night and Iwobi's on the left-hand side starting. How would that make you feel?
Really frustrated. I was already a little bit frustrated when I saw it, even before seeing Kevin, his first impact for Fulham, because Iwobi coming back from an international break, we've seen before, it's a long journey back and there's a lot of factors. And to be honest, he looked a bit tired. And it's understandable. He plays a lot of football and had just been away, obviously, with Nigeria, with Bassi, and also with our new signing Chukwueze as well. So I was a bit frustrated. I'd be so frustrated after that impact from Kevin. Kevin is not a player that hasn't had a pre-season. I would say he's had more than that. He's had like actual
5 goals.
proper games, in European competition, high pressure, huge stakes for Shakhtar, by the way, in those games that he was playing. Like, they weren't just like Conference League playoffs that they were going to skim through. They were games that they absolutely had to win and they had to perform. And he was their star man. He has had enough football to be able to start, and he's been with the squad for the full international break. I understand the reasons that obviously Chukwueze and JKA weren't involved. I get it completely. They've just come back. They've only just met their teammates. Silva was saying things like they don't even know their teammates' names in full yet. And
they don't even know houses to stay in. They're staying in hotels.
There you go. That's not the right environment to be starting to put pressure on these players. So that's the right time to integrate them. And this is another reason, not to bang the door, why you should try and get the business done earlier, if possible. Just to put that back out there. Now, Kevin is one where he should be starting on Saturday, 100%. And I would love to see Robinson behind him as well. Now, that might not be possible. We don't know what the situation with Robinson's fitness is. And I thought that Sessegnon had a very good game.
Were you surprised that Robinson didn't come on?
I was, yeah. And I wouldn't say that it would have been for me instead of Sessegnon. I would have thought that Sessegnon might have gone further forward onto that right-hand side. I know that it's a complete opposite in terms of positioning on the pitch, but I thought he was having a good game. And I thought that Wilson wasn't having much impact. So when the Adama sub happened, if I'm honest, that was the moment where I thought Robinson would have come on, filled in at left back, and Sessegnon would have gone to right wing. As it goes, Adama, good impact from him, good cameo, was happy with that. One of his better cameos that we've seen from him so far this season, including in the cup game against Bristol City. So I was happy with that. But there's changes that I'd want to see, Jack. Let's go into it right now. I'd want to see Robinson start because I think that he adds so much to our attack. I'd want to see Kevin start. And then I think in midfield, something's got to change. And like you, I agree that Lukic had a better game than Berger and has had the better season than Berger so far this season. I don't think Berger's been bad. I just think Lukic has been better. And I think Lukic has been doing more at both ends of the pitch. So I'd love to see Lukic stay in midfield. Ideally, I'd like to see Josh King stay there. My worry is that if Josh King has to come slightly deeper, because I think Smith Rowe should be starting, as I've said before. I think that's an absolute has to after his multiple cameos this season, but in particular the one the other day. It's only fair. It has to be basically Josh King or Iwobi, based on my logic, that's coming a little bit deeper. And I do worry about Josh King against Yarmouk and against Henderson from a physical point of view, if he's coming a little bit deeper. So I potentially say, and I don't really want to say this, that Josh King would go to the bench for this one, and Iwobi would start. If there was a way to make it work, I would love to see Smith Rowe and Josh King both playing together in that midfield with Lukic. That's what I would like. I worry about how that would go down with this Brentford team. So that's what I'd like. So in total, that is 3 changes. So Robinson coming in, Kevin coming in, and then Smith Rowe coming in. The right-hand side is also up for debate. Obviously we've got Harry Wilson that started there and didn't have his most impactful game, I think it's fair to say. He was much better in some of his earlier cameos this season and obviously in pre-season. I don't think I'd want to start Adama. I think I'd leave him as an impact sub. So then there's just a case of, is Chukwueze ready to make an impact? Not necessarily from the start, but off the bench. But I think I would stick with the 3 changes and leave Harry Wilson in from the start. What do you think?
I think we're blessed that we have Carabao Cup action next week, which I think is going to play its part in terms of integrating every single player into the squad. And I'm not even talking about Chukwueze and JKA. I am talking about them in this case, but maybe Sefrigen as well. Because if we're lacking a midfield option in terms of the squad, I don't think Ridgen comes in and starts playing week in, week out and starts being involved with the squad. Let's not forget that the squad we put out on Saturday, and I suppose this is good news because of depth. It meant that 4 first teamers had to miss out. So no JKA, no Chukwueze, no Cuenca, no Reed. And I think they were all there. They were all there watching the game, which is good for squad development and chemistry. I have to agree. The only issue I have with this midfield is that obviously if Josh King plays a little bit deeper, I feel like we're going to be a little bit less balanced in midfield. Suddenly there's a lot of... When you're playing as a number 10, your job is essentially to support the striker and play balls out to wide men and put pressure on the defence, etc., etc. Suddenly you're an 8 and you're having to go up and then down the pitch. That's a lot of work rate. And obviously Josh King has played 8 and predominantly does play 8 for the under-21s. It's a whole different ballpark when it comes to the Premier League. Do I think that Josh is up to it? I think at some point this season there's going to be a time where he plays in the number 8, and I think he'll do very, very well. Look, I get Marco Silva's standpoint, and I get his frustration about the midfield. It's very frustrating, it really is. And the more you hear from him about the situation, the more frustrated I sort of feel about the situation. I think he's going to have to play Iwobi in the 8 just to give us a bit more balance. I love Josh King. Honestly, he's one of my favourite Fulham players. But it does feel as though we're at a stage of the season where we need points on the board, and we need to be... I'm not suggesting that Silva's going to do this, but don't start making points by making your 11 like this to sort of send a message. Do you know what I mean? And I think that Iwobi in the 8 makes more sense for me, sitting in front of Sasha Lukic. I think Berge, like I say, he just didn't have a very good game at all against Leeds. And actually, he struggled to play forward passes. He struggled to even get forward, and Lukic was the one who was sort of breaking forward out of the two. Obviously, I know that the Berge sits a little bit deeper, but so I'm going to go with Leno, Tete, who, by the way, Anderson and Bassi, phenomenal, and Tete and Cess, brilliant at the weekend. So Bassi, Anderson, Bassi, Robinson, left-hand side. I'm going to be seeing Robinson tomorrow night at the Fulham Foundation event. Hopefully he's going to be doing a Q&A, and hopefully he might give us some answers as to where his fitness is at. Lukic, Iwobi, Smith Rowe, Kevin, Muniz, Wilson, who put the ball in the Brentford net, Harry Wilson. Let's do it again. Chukwueze this time to come off the bench and do some clever things and excite the fans. Jimenez to probably come on for Muniz at some point. I am still concerned about Muniz's performances from the start. A lot of people saying, oh, maybe we should start Rao and bring Muniz off the bench because he's the impact sub. That was very much a case of last season. The situation's very much changed with Muniz now, where he thinks, well, he doesn't think, but he's probably seen as the top striker, with a bigger value in terms of the market, and in that case, he's demanding obviously playing more minutes, and therefore, I think he's probably the best striker we have at the club, and therefore needs to start the games, right? Whereas last season he was brilliant from the bench and scored loads of goals. Once Muniz gets one goal from the start, I think he'll fly, because obviously his goal came from the bench against Brighton, and he came close with the header in the second half.
He's just quite a streaky player. Now you say it, isn't he, Jay? He's quite a streaky player in terms of when he had that first purple patch, which was amazing in that season when we weren't really expecting him to break through, and we just signed Brozier on loan. But then even last season, his goals seemed to come in spells. Yeah. So hopefully, like you say, one just kicks him off.
And then you look at the performance against Liverpool, where he started and was unbelievable. Spun Van Dijk, scored a goal, and he was unplayable. There's a lot of, and I know obviously Fulham fans like this, any football fan are like this, very much impatience when it comes to players. There was a lot of talk about Muniz after the game. Is he good enough to, exactly, if a striker doesn't score, suddenly fans are going to be questioning their performance and stuff. I would like to think that goals are going to come from all over the pitch in this Fulham side this season, like it did last season. I think there's goals all over the shop. Kevin obviously can score. Well, he hasn't scored yet, but he looks like he could score. Smith Rowe, King, obviously Muniz, Wilson. I think Cess can definitely get a few as well. Iwobi obviously can score goals. I'm not worried in that sense, but I would like to see Muniz, obviously, and I think we spoke about this in the last Jack and Joe we did. Muniz have a really top performance from the start. Sometimes it's based on the opposition. Like the hold-up play to win the free kick for Harry Wilson, very, very good, very strong play. So the Brentford issue for me is they played a 4-2-3-1 for the whole season. Then they went to a 5-3-2 against the other West London side, and Sharda and Thiago up top with a midfield of Henderson, Yarmouk and Jensen, and obviously Coyote, who I think is a really, really good player. Lewis Potter as a left wing back, Pinnock, Collins, Van den Berg, and Kelleher in goal. I don't know whether Keith Andrews knows his system yet, but that certainly worked to a better extent against them than it did in the previous games. I know they beat Aston Villa, but I think having Sharda up top with Thiago, having sort of a bustling 6 foot plus hold up striker in Thiago who can pitch in with goals, And then obviously playing off him as a very quick striker in Sharda, whose goal was very similar to Josh King's goal at the Bridge, in terms of who he was up against and also sort of the finish. I know it deflected off Tosin this time. Henderson obviously is a decent midfield, but I think we can get at Henderson completely. And I think if they approach this game and play a 5, which I believe will be the first time they play a 5 away from home this season, again, that's going to be another opposition we're going to have to try and break down, which is why Kevin has to start from the off, in my opinion.
There will be one advantage if they play a 5, is if they play a 5, it probably means that Damsgaard's still out. That is one advantage, because that was a big miss for them against Chelsea. He's a huge player for them. And obviously it meant that Dango Utara was also on the bench. And obviously he's a record signing for them, a big, big money signing. Couldn't get in the team. They're a weird team to call, Brentford, and their flexibility is part of that, but also their unpredictability, I think, especially away from home. Their performance levels can just vary so much. Against Forest, they were appalling. They were absolutely appalling. Terrible. And to be honest, 3-1 flattered them. Against Sunderland, from everything I saw, I've watched a lot of extended highlights, I've read about it, I've watched and listened to both sets of fans. It seemed like Brentford were there or thereabouts as the better team until they got a penalty, which they actually missed. It was saved. Then they go 1-0 up, and just after that, they fell apart, and they just didn't offer anything. And it sounded really similar to me to when they came to the Cottage last season, and they tried to almost quit while you're ahead, shut up shop. It doesn't always work like that. I think that Brentford work a lot better when they are playing a bit more proactively, playing on the break, and trying to make things just really difficult for the opposition. They do things, and as much as I dislike them as a club and the fan base, due to rivalry and due to just them being really irritating to me over the years, I respect a lot of what they do in terms of they play the way that suits them best, and they utilize things that are maybe seen. There's been so much talk about long throws, for example. They've done this since they got promoted, in just terms of cause chaos for other teams. Where on the pitch would you least like the ball to be? Let's put it there. There's no need to do all the fancy stuff in between. And I do respect that. I think that we obviously haven't conceded a goal yet from open play. I thought that we were much better at dealing with set pieces on the weekend, but this does concern me slightly, because obviously we've conceded 2. United obviously shouldn't have counted, but the João Pedro one really annoyed me in terms of how we set up. Regardless of anything else in that game, that was our own fault completely.
I thought we should have gone.
There's things that I'm nervous about for this game, but the way that we've been so solid at the back, and like you rightly say, no goals conceded from open play so far. I saw Arsenal fans waxing lyrical about that for themselves, and I was thinking, yeah, great, we're the same. And our defensive sort of level is much lower, and definitely was lower last season. So I hope it can continue. I think it's a game that we have to win for what we want to do, which is hopefully push for Europe and take advantage of all these teams that are in European competition. 9 out of 20 teams, including a lot of the teams that are fighting for those positions, they all kick off this week. I am really hoping that this will be another great night under the lights of the Cottage. I'm expecting a great atmosphere. And I'm actually expecting, Jack, another 2-1 win for Fulham, the same as last season. I'm hoping it won't be in the same manner, as much as that would be wonderful at the time. I can't take the stress of it. I am expecting a 2-1 win, and that's what I'm also hoping for. So, fingers crossed. What do you reckon will happen on Saturday?
They've also got Fabio Carvalho as well, who can play on the 10. And Nelson. Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yeah. So, essentially, if they go back to a 4-2-3-1, they could essentially play Otara right or Nelson right, Fabio in the 10, Sharda left, and then Thiago up top if they don't have Damsgaard. So, that'll be interesting to see what happens. I'll be very much looking out for the team news when it comes to Keith Andrews' press conference. Statement. Sound like a certain TNC podcast. Fulham 3, Brentford 0 full time. 3-0.
Wow, we were is what I would say to that. That would be fantastic.
Smith Rowe double. Kevin 3.
Kevin 3. That's 5. I'm joking.
Well, Kevin with the 3rd.
I think a Kevin hat-trick would send me to a state of bliss that hasn't been discovered yet. Like, when you see a mirage in a film when you're going through the desert and it's so perfect, I would be seeing Kevin with the match ball. I think that is what it would be.
Kevin hat-trick, I'm in Lefez. I think Kevin hat-trick and Fulham win. I think Lefez all night long. And that's the only other option. because obviously you got the 8 o'clock, you go straight into it. From the press conference of all my bags as well. That'd be good fun. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what's been a really interesting Premier League season so far. You've got teams like Aston Villa who haven't scored yet. We play them in a couple of games' time. You've got a team like Leeds who've only scored 1 goal, which was a penalty. West Ham have had an absolute nightmare. We've already had a Premier League sacking as well, with Nuno going and Ange Postecoglou coming in. And yeah, it's been a really weird start to the season. Burnley, it's interesting because Burnley, Leeds, and newly promoted, Sunderland have already won at least 1 game. Sunderland winning. Have Sunderland won 2?
Yeah, they've won 2. They beat Brentford and West Ham.
That's it. They've won 2. So they've all won. And I was like, oh, maybe the promoted teams are going to be really good this season. And it seems as if Sunderland have done okay because they got a 0-0 draw at the Sellers Park. And Leeds, like I say, haven't scored since that opening night against Everton from the spot. And Burnley obviously losing in imagine losing that sort of game to Salah's penalty. But it's not like they created anything, did they? Either.
No,
so are we sort of reverting back to this sort of status quo? And then also you've got West Ham really struggling, Villa not scoring, and no points for Wolves either.
I think kind of, but I think that, like you say, Wolves and West Ham are 2 that really need to be looking over their shoulders at the moment. I mean, I wonder what the state of West Ham would be like if they hadn't got that win at Forest now, which seems like a crazy result. He would be long gone, long gone. The newly promoted teams, I think that they look a lot more defensively sturdy. I will take out of this that Arsenal 5 Leeds 0, because in the other games where Leeds had a more chance of getting points, let's say a realistic chance of getting points, I think they set up well against us, and they obviously did really well in their 2 home games against Everton and Newcastle, neither of which are mugs in attack. I know that it was before Everton sort of brought in a few of their new signings, like Grealish wasn't in there from the start, but nevertheless, a great result and one that I would certainly take, regardless of how it came about. I don't think Leeds have enough going forward, and that really solidified in my brain the other day. I just thought, I'm not seeing any goals in this team. I was never nervous they were going to score, and that's when they had chances. No, he's not. I mean, that header, actually kind of similar to the Mooney's one in the second half, but both of them should have done a lot better. I think Calvert-Lewin's was worse because of the height that it sort of came to him at was a perfect height for getting some power on it and really making Leno work at the very least, rather than just sort of go like that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think he was offside, but nevertheless, he should be doing some more with that. I think that Sunderland are a really interesting one because they had the easiest. I remember speaking to you about it when the fixtures first came out, and we said their fixtures on paper are really good early on. They need to pick up some points here. They have. They've had a really good start. They've got Villa next, who still haven't scored. I'm praying, by the way, that Villa score against Sunderland because I cannot physically take it that we go into that game and they still haven't scored a goal next week, because it'll be us
John
after
McGinn.
this. Off his arse, something like that. Yeah, no, absolutely. And there's a lot to aim with. Put it that way. I really want. I don't not saying want Villa to win there, but I want them to score. Get that monkey off their back.
Absolutely.
As for the others, I mean, Burnley, I thought they defended so well against Liverpool. I mean, Liverpool weren't great, but they really nullified them to any clear-cut chances. Is that
lots of shots from range?
Lots of shots from range.
Yeah.
Is it going to be enough to keep them up? No. But ultimately, they've had one must-win home game against Sunderland. They've won it. They play Leeds at home in a few weeks. And honestly, from what I saw the other day and what I've seen so far, I think Burnley have got more about them going forward than Leeds do. So a really interesting to start the season. The title race looks interesting because obviously Liverpool haven't really been convincing in any of their games so far, but they've won all of them. Arsenal have looked really promising in their 2 home games, but when it came to those tricky away games at United and against Liverpool, they didn't create much at all. So I'm interested to see how that will progress with their new signings and when Saka comes back as well. City obviously had been a little bit hit and miss, but now they've brought in Donnarumma in goal. I felt like there was a big difference in how I was viewing them defensively, because I was thinking they're not going to concede from their first shot they let on target this time with a Trafford or with an Edison.
Manchester City, right? I don't know why we're talking about them at all, really. But the 5 players that they had injured, right?
Yeah.
Against United: Stones, Kovacic, Ait-Nouri, Marmoush, and Shirky. 5 massive players for them.
They arguably all start, right? They all start.
Yeah. Once they all come back in the fold, they're going to be menacing. I mean, Haaland looks as good as he does. Foden looks fantastic. Reiners is one of my favourite players to watch at the moment. Rodri's obviously back.
Yeah,
they're looking good, and
they go to the Emirates next, so that'll be a very interesting game. We will be there. I will be
hangover, hopefully. Lefebvre's hangover. I need to stop saying Lefebvre because he plays for Sunderland.
Yeah, we're going to Enzo Lefebvre. To be fair, I think they play on the Sunday as well.
Brentford 8 p.m. kickoff. Are you going to be in the pub for 12:30 watching the Merseyside derby? Is it going to be a marathon?
You know what? I'm very much considering it. Put it that way, and especially now that Fulham don't do the early bird offers that are quite as enticing. £5 is fine, but a £5 is a £5.
Is very good value for stuff.
It's very good value, but it's not the insane value that I was getting last season, where I was like, five pints, please, for that price. In those early games. So I think, look, hopefully no trouble, but a great time, in my opinion, for a kickoff in a derby. Everyone is going to be up for it. And I would say as well, it's not even just a drinking related thing, because I know there's a large portion of fan base that either can't or don't want to drink. I think that it's great. You've had the build-up of the full day of football, and it gets to your game last. It's a Saturday night. Yeah. It's not like Monday when you got work in the morning. I know. I mean, some people will, but most people that work a 9 to 5, for example, won't. I'm so excited for it, Jack, and I can't wait to be back at the Cottage. I'm so thankful that we're then back a couple of days later against Cambridge in a game that, to be honest, we can't even preview, because it's impossible to call what that team will be, because we don't know how ready Chukwueze, JKA are. Yeah. We don't know what's going to happen against Brentford in terms of who's going to come in from the start, and therefore who will maybe need minutes against Cambridge. But I'm very, very excited to have a 3-game week once again with Fulham. It's been a while.
And of course, the European football starts this week as well. Obviously, Fulham's getting pushed to Sunday against Aston Villa, Newcastle, Barcelona on Thursday. We will be there watching it. Friday night, under-21s action against West Bromwich Albion. Or you could watch Middlesbrough versus... can't even remember who they're playing on Friday night. But and then the Brentford game on Saturday, and then we're sort of... the season sort of kick-started with the European football obviously being back as well. Joe Sansom's been an absolute pleasure. We've won a game of football. Spirits are high. Kevin is the best player in the world, and we feel like we can go to the moon with him.
Summed it up perfectly. Thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. Hope you enjoy the big derby on Saturday, and come on, you Whites.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for watching. We're going to be back, maybe not very soon, but maybe in a few weeks.
A hiatus, shall we say.
A new schedule for Fulhamish. So we've been pushed back a week, I think. So post Villa, I want to say, pre Bournemouth. A lot can happen between then.
I think it's post Bournemouth that we're back.
Ooh.
Just to say.
Friday night vitality. If Kevin gets a hat trick, will be in the Bournemouth version of Lefebvre's. Take care, guys. Come on, Fulham.